Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Ask the ARC. My name is Carly Shertino-Polter, and I'm the director of the ARC Advocacy Network at the ARC of Indiana. And tonight, we're going to talk about Medicaid redeterminations because we have been getting a lot of calls about Medicaid and about people having trouble with Medicaid. And oftentimes we're getting calls because out of nowhere, somebody has lost their Medicaid and they're only finding out because a provider has called to say, hey, we're showing that your Medicaid is terminated. We can't bill, so we can't come out. Or they've gone to the doctor's office and the doctor says, hey, your Medicaid's showing up as inactive. So it's causing a lot of problems. And so tonight, what I want to talk about is Medicaid redeterminations, because I want to make sure that people are aware of what all is going on and that they know the best practices on how to proceed so that they are able to keep their Medicaid and therefore keep their waiver. Because in all honesty, I don't want anyone losing their health care or losing their waiver services over a paperwork issue. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I want to let you know that I want you to ask your questions, especially because there is so much confusion right now. So if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we will get to those questions during our presentation today. I also want to share that we're seeing a lot of different things. And so I'm going to share the things that we are seeing and how to deal with those things. I also want to share with you some of I'm not going to necessarily call them changes, but some of the updates I am seeing with Medicaid as well, so that you are prepared for all of those things and you know how to proceed appropriately. So thank you for joining us tonight. I look forward to your questions, and let's go ahead and dig in. So first, we're talking about keeping your Medicaid active and navigating that Medicaid redetermination process. So first, let's talk about what redeterminations actually are and why they happen. Because I talk to a lot of families who assume that because their loved one has a Medicaid waiver, that they don't have to deal with any of this. That if they've got a waiver, they'll always have Medicaid. That's not exactly true because you always have to make sure that you are Medicaid eligible in order to keep your waiver. So just having the waiver doesn't automatically make you eligible for Medicaid. You still have rules you have to follow. And so those redeterminations, their purpose is to ensure that individuals are still eligible, especially making sure that they are still financially eligible for Medicaid. Because when you have a waiver, the Medicaid financial rules change. You still have to be financially eligible for Medicaid. Also, you may one of the reasons they do redeterminations is so that they can change a person's Medicaid category when it's appropriate. I know when I started this job, I thought Medicaid was just Medicaid. I was wrong. Here in Indiana, we have 37 different types of Medicaid. And while there are some general overarching rules for all of them, every one of those 37 types has their own exceptions and their own twists and turns in all of this. So sometimes it may be appropriate to change a person's category depending on what's going on in their lives. I also want to talk a little bit about timeline because redeterminations are only supposed to occur once a year. Now, effective December 31st of 2026, that's going to change. That was one of the provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill that was passed by Congress back in July. And effective December 31st, they will require redeterminations twice a year, starting with HIP. But what we're seeing right now in practice is that Medicaid is conducting periodic reviews because right now they're not allowed to do redeterminations more than once a month. So they are reviewing a person's situation, or what I like to jokingly call redetermination light, because it is very much like a redetermination. They just can't call it that. So they are conducting these periodic reviews, and that's what's causing a lot of problems for people. So when Medicaid is doing a redetermination, or a review right now, they will request information. You will always get a letter in the mail requesting this information. Now, notice I've got a little asterisk next to that. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But you should always be getting a letter in the mail requesting this information. The problem is when you open the letter, the title of the letter says important information about your health coverage. Well, that could mean just about anything. But if you actually read the letter, it's going to ask you for information on all of your income and your assets or resources. Medicaid uses the term resources. When I hear the term resources, I think of the libraries and the parks departments. So I use the word assets because that's what makes me think of money. And that's what they're trying to find out here is what money do you have? It will also list when the benefits will terminate if you don't provide that information. And it'll list a deadline of when you have to return the information to them. But that deadline to return the information is listed on page 3. So you kind of got to dig for that a little bit. So let's talk about what type of information they want you to provide. Okay. Well, first of all, they want any and all income information. So they want to know, they want copies of your pay stubs. They want to know if you have any other type of information or any other type of income. Now, don't get me wrong, the Medicaid computer system talks to the Social Security computer system. So they've already got your Social Security information. But if you have any other income, so for example, if you have a parent who is retired military and your parent has designated you as a beneficiary on their retirement income, that's additional income. And so that's additional information that you need to provide. Here's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize because, Medicaid is looking at your income for the month. But sometimes we have people who are paid every other week, which means twice a year you get a third paycheck during the month. And that can really mess some things up. It can actually cause people to go over income. But there's actually a provision within the Medicaid rules where you can ask Medicaid to use the average budgeting method instead of the monthly budgeting method. Now you have to make that request in writing. So in fact, you can actually put that request on your redetermination paperwork and ask them to use that average budgeting method if you are somebody who gets paid every other week and that third paycheck can put you over income. Know that you can actually request that and take care of that situation because what will happen is they will average out your income. So they will take all of your paychecks for, all 26 of your paychecks for the year and divide that by 12 to figure out your average monthly income that way, rather than your actual monthly income. Then they also want to know all of your asset or resource information. Now, here's the thing. Not all types of Medicaid look at assets or resources. So HIP, for example, does not consider someone's assets, but Medicaid for the aging population, Medicaid for the blind population, Medicaid disability, and what they call the Medicare Savings Plan. So if somebody is on Medicare and Indiana Medicaid is paying for their Medicare premium or their Medicare premiums and co-pays, then Medicaid wants to know all of your asset or resource information. Here's the thing. Sometimes people will think, yeah, I'm just not going to tell them those things. Medicaid, the state uses an electronic asset verification system to check what assets you may have. So if you think, yeah, I'm just not going to report those savings bonds I have, guess what? They have that information. I will also say that sometimes you may have assets in your name that you don't know about. That asset verification system can pull those up. So know that there are ways for them to find out. And when they are trying to determine your asset level for your asset limit, they are looking at the amount of assets you have at midnight on the first of the month. Okay. But If you get money that is meant for the next month, so let's say, for example, you get paid on the 30th. Well, they know that paycheck is meant for the next month, so they're going to count it that way. Let's say you get SSI, which is normally paid on the 1st, wouldn't be a problem, but the 1st falls on a weekend. So they're going to pay you the Friday before, which means they're paying you on the 29th or the 30th. Well, Medicaid knows that that Social Security money is meant for the next month. Count that in they're not supposed to count that in their resource calculations. Now, I say that because genuinely, they don't want to do that. Occasionally, things go a little sideways, and that's why we need to take care of these things. And there are always ways to do that. But generally speaking, if they know that the money is meant for the next month, it will not be counted against you as a resource. So let's talk about the types of information that they're looking for. Well, first of all, they're looking for anything that verifies your income. So they want copies of your pay stubs. They want copies of anything that shows any income. So like I said, if you are getting a monthly pension benefit or an annuity payment or something along those lines, they want that information. They want bank statements with full account numbers, and that kind of causes a problem because oftentimes bank statements, when you try to print them up, will not include the full account number. You need to make sure that what you are providing for them shows the full account number, because otherwise they'll say you did not provide the requested documents. So I want to warn you of that. They're going to ask for 529 information. So if you've got a 529 college account, or if you have an ABLE account, they're going to ask for that information, but neither of those accounts are counted as an asset by Medicaid. So don't worry about it, but they want to see those because in part, they want to make sure that they are set up correctly, because they have to be set up correctly to be exempt or not counted. Same with a special needs trust. If you have a special needs trust, they want copies of that trust information, and whoever's managing your special needs trust will be able to get you all of that information. If you have a funeral trust, they want that information. If you own a car, or you own a house, or you own any other type of property, they want copies of that. Here's the thing though, if you own property that is used for a business, so let's say, for example, that you own, well, here are a couple of examples that are going to seem a little wild here. Let's say you own a farm, okay? Well, that farm is what is called income generating property. So they will not count that, but they still need to have the information about it. Okay, so they want information on any property. And so there are ways you can have some property that Medicaid will not count. And the things I've talked about so far, owning a house, owning a car, having a special needs trust, having an ABLE account, having a 529 college account, all of those are exempt. Okay. If you have life insurance, they want life insurance information, but I'm going to tell you to be careful because in my experience, I see that this gets messed up all the time. So first of all, only provide the life insurance information if the person on Medicaid owns the policy. So there is a difference between the owner of a policy and the subject of a policy. So for example, I have a life insurance policy on my son, okay? My son is the subject of the policy so that when he passes away, I, or later on in life, his brother will get money to be able to take care of his final expenses. He's the subject of the policy. I am the owner of the policy. I am the only one who can cash that in. So we wouldn't report it to Medicaid because it is not my son's asset. It is my asset because I am the owner. The other thing is you only want to report life insurance if it builds cash value. Not all life insurance does. If you have a term life insurance policy, for example, there is no cash value attached to that. Therefore, it's not an asset. So because you cannot, there's no value to it, you cannot cash it in. I also see where sometimes things are typed in incorrectly, and sometimes they will put in the face value of the policy instead of the cash value of the policy. Those are radically different things. If you've got a $50,000 life insurance policy on your child and it has no cash value, well, $50,000 is not its cash value. But let's say it is a whole life policy, for example, and it's got a cash value of, say, $1,200. Sometimes what I see is it gets, because the face value of the policy is 50,000, it gets typed in as the cash value is 50,000. So that's one of those things you be careful about, and you have the documentation ready so that if you need to appeal that, you can. I also want to say rules on income and assets can change. When I started working for the ARC, a 529 college account was counted as a resource against you. It no longer is. Also, early on, I had a family who actually lost their Medicaid because they owned two cemetery plots, so that when they passed away, there was a place to bury them. Back then, a cemetery plot was counted as an asset, and it was counted in that $2,000 asset limit. And so this family lost their Medicaid because of it. Burial plots are no longer counted as an asset. That is something that changed over time. So a lot of these rules are not, they're not exactly set in stone. They can change over time. So I want you just to be aware of that. And I also want to say there are a lot of specialized rules that may exclude certain income or certain assets from being counted by Medicaid. Part of that's going to depend on which programs that you are involved with, but there are a lot of specialized rules as well. I also, you guys know me well enough at this point because you've been on a lot of our webinars before. You know that I tend to joke that people on waivers are the purple sparkly unicorns of the world because they qualify for all sorts of programs, but they break a lot of the normal rules in the process. This is absolutely true with Medicaid. When you have a Medicaid waiver, there are a lot of changes to the income and asset limits, especially the income limits, but also things like whose income is counted, what assets are counted. So know that there are specialized rules when it comes to a lot of our individuals. And because of that, like I said, if I'm being reasonable here, I recognize that we've got about 50,000 people on waivers here in Indiana, and we have about 2 million people on Medicaid. So literally we make up about 2% of what they do, and we break a lot of their normal rules in the process. So I will say we need to recognize that not all Medicaid personnel are familiar with the specialized rules that come along with being a person who's on a waiver. Um, and even if they are familiar with it, they may not be thinking of it right away because we're part of that 2%, not that 98% that they normally deal with. So sometimes you can get general information out of the Medicaid office that is true 98% of the time. We're just the 2% of the time when it's not accurate. So sometimes you can get, um, uh, there can be a misunderstanding with Medicaid, I will say. So how do you actually provide that information? Well, you can mail it in and you can fax it in. But the two most reliable ways to get that information to Medicaid is to either take it into the local Medicaid office or to use the Medicaid benefits portal. If you take that information into the Medicaid office, make sure that you get it stamped with the date that it is received, and that you request copies of that of those stamped received papers so that you can keep them for your records, because you'd be amazed at how often you need those. But let's talk about the Medicaid benefits portal, because this is something that is relatively new and can be an incredible help to people. So we're going to go through and show you what the Medicaid benefits portal actually looks like. And so when you go to their homepage, this is what you're going to see. If you already have an account, you can create an account, or you can go ahead and sign in here. If you've not created an account before, you can create an account now. This is also where you can apply for Medicaid, also where you can apply for SNAP benefits, or cash assistance, which is TANF, or temporary assistance for needy family, or temporary aid for needy families. So this is what the first page is going to look like. If you have to create an account, this is what you're going to see. And so I want you to know this because you're going to need the person's date of birth. You're going to need the last 4 digits of their social security number. You're going to need an email address, and it's going to be an email address that's going to be associated with the account. So anytime you log in, you're going to use your email address to do so. I will also share that if you've got 2 different what are called assistance groups, you can't use the same email address for them. So you'd have to use different ones. So for example, if you've got a child who's on the waiver, you can create an account and use your email address, and that way you can use this for your child. But let's say your mom or your grandmother is also on Medicaid. They're on Pathways. You would not be able to use your email address for your grandmother's account to help her get in. Okay, so I just want you to know that too. So then once you create your account, this is what it's going to look like when you log in. And I know that this is really small, but it's because this particular homepage is really, really big. There are a lot of different things that you can do through this, and we're going to walk you through it. So for example, one of the things that you can do is you can see any notices or correspondence that Medicaid has sent you. So what you would do is right here is where you would have the case number and then the case name. And over here, you should see notices and correspondence. So you can click there, or you can click on the case number or case name and get into that and see all of this. Okay. I told you earlier that I put an asterisk next to the fact that you will always get a letter in the mail. That's because one of the biggest things we're seeing right now, and one of the biggest reasons people are having problems, is because while Medicaid is sending out letters to people, the people are never actually getting the letters. So Medicaid is sending out requests for information. The person is never getting that request for information, so they're not providing information. So Medicaid terminates their Medicaid for failure to provide the requested information. It's a vicious cycle here. And so one of the things that we are recommending, especially because the mail is having so many problems right now, is once a month, log into your Medicaid benefits portal. Click on this notices and correspondence section, and you will see every single letter Medicaid has sent you in the last year. You would actually be able to click on view, download. There is something else that says there, but even I can't read that. But you can click on that so that you can see the actual letters that they send you. That way you can also stay up to date, so that if you check this once a month, if you didn't get a letter in the mail, but it turns out Medicaid sent you that redetermination notice, you can see it here and you can actually respond. What's also nice is you can also see the solicited documents. What documents are they asking for right now? And then the documents that they've received. Because we have all likely in the past come across a situation where Medicaid has said, oh, we never got that information, even though you provided it. That's why it's important to always keep copies of it being stamped received if you took it in. But what's nice now with this Medicaid benefits portal is you can upload documents directly. So if you go back to that home page, here you'd have the case number and the case name. Here's where you would look at notices and correspondence. But here it says upload documents. So if you have your pay stubs and you have electronic copies of them, you can upload them directly. You can scan a copy and make a copy of something and upload it directly so that you don't have to worry about something getting lost uh, somewhere along the way. Now, I will tell you, because again, you can look at documents received. Give their computer system 24 hours to update, okay? Just to give them a little bit of grace about making sure that they got the documents. Give them a little time to make sure that the documents upload and that the system updates to give that correct information. So, but uploading those documents directly will make a huge difference. And it's the most reliable way to make sure that they get those documents. And then there's no question that they actually received them. So let's talk about a little bit of best practices here. First of all, look for letters. Open and respond to all letters from Medicaid or from FSSA in general, because oftentimes the letters aren't saying that they're from Medicaid. The letters say that they're from the Family and Social Services Administration. Don't ignore any of those letters. If you get a letter from FSSA, open it right away to see what it says. Also, log into that benefits portal every month just to check on notices and correspondence. As an easy way to remember it, when you are paying your bills at the first of the month, you're paying your rent, you're paying your mortgage, remember to log into your Medicaid account at the same time so that you can check for notices and correspondence to see if they have sent you requests for information or if they have sent you a redetermination notice. You want to comply with all deadlines. The letters will say when information must be in, and you need to get it in. I know that sounds silly, but part of it is in the past, especially people on waivers, you know, because there was a lot more leeway, because people were, especially children, were assumed to still be eligible. That redetermination paperwork says you only need to respond if you have to update information. That's not really the case anymore, especially right now. You need to respond to every single one of those requests because they're not going to give the benefit of the doubt anymore. And so you need to actually submit that new paperwork every single year. Also, there used to be some leeway. If you had a deadline of getting something in by August 18th, but you got it in the 19th, or you got it in, within a month, they would work things out so that even if it was due August 18th, the Medicaid computer system will automatically generate a letter saying you're being terminated if they don't have all the information. But if you got it in within a month, they'd pretty much just reinstate it. A lot of that leeway is going away. And it's not that the rules are changing, it's that they are more strictly adhering to the rules that already exist. And that's going to be new for a lot of people because we had a lot of people who started getting Medicaid during COVID. And during COVID, a lot of the normal rules were suspended. So a lot of people don't know the normal Medicaid rules. Even though they've been slowly unwinding, it's just not something they're used to. We also had people who were used to one set of, even if they were on Medicaid or their loved one was on Medicaid before COVID, maybe they were children and they became adults during COVID. Well, adults tend to have different rules than children, even when they're on waivers. And so those families didn't realize that those rules changed when their child became an adult. And so they're not used to those new rules. It's not that they're really new, it's just that now we're going back to using the rules that were always in place before COVID, and they're more strictly adhering to those rules. Other best practices, you want to keep copies of everything because paperwork, believe it or not, it may be a pain in the neck, but paperwork is your friend. Paperwork is what is going to save you. It's that paper trail, it's that documentation that can really save you when things go sideways. So you want to keep copies of all letters. If you provide copies in person, get those documents date stamped, received, and then ask for a copy so that you can keep those for your records. If you are using a fax, keep a copy of what you faxed and the success receipt proving that Medicaid got it. But even when you are doing absolutely everything right, something can sometimes go wrong. So what do you do when that happens? Because the good news is almost everything is fixable. It's all about how many hoops we got to jump through to fix them. Okay, but most things are fixable. First of all, if you get a termination notice, appeal right away. And that is incredibly important. It can be as simple as a letter saying, I believe you made this decision in error. I wish to appeal. It can be that simple, but it's important to do it within the right time frame because deadlines matter. If you need to, if you need to switch Medicaid categories, for example, you only have 13 days to appeal that. So let's say you're a person who's on Medicaid and you're working, and Medicaid says, oh, you make too much money now. We're kicking you off of Medicaid. Well, there's a version of Medicaid called MedWorks. Literally stands for Medicaid for Employees with Disabilities. It has much higher income limits. In fact, it's 350% of the poverty level, which for 2025 means you can make just under $55,000 a year in countable income from all sources and have full Medicaid. Well, let's say you're a person who doesn't have a waiver, but let's say you're a person with mental illness, and you have been on Medicaid. You were on HIP, but you're working, and you're now making too much money for HIP. Okay. Well, if you were ever determined disabled by Social Security, you can request to go on MedWorks, which would keep your Medicaid in place. That wasn't the best example because if you've ever been determined well, nope, never mind. I'm keeping my mouth shut because I was wrong on that. But that's a Medicaid category change. Instead of being on HIP, you should be on MedWorks. That's a different category. You've only got 13 days to appeal that. But if let's say Medicaid says, hey, you didn't provide all the documentation we request, you've got 30, so we're terminating you. You've got 33 days to request an appeal then. The reason that's important, if you get your appeal request into Medicaid in time, meaning before the 13 days or before the 33 days, your Medicaid stays in place while you are appealing. That also means your waiver stays in place while you are appealing. Okay. If your Medicaid terminates and you didn't get your appeal in within by the deadline, your Medicaid is terminated. You're still going to go through the appeals process, and assuming you win, it'll retroactively reinstate your Medicaid, but that means you can't use it right now, and it means that your waiver services are basically going to be suspended while you're going through this appeals process. So those deadlines matter, okay? Also, read that denial or termination notice because it's going to tell you why you were denied or why you were terminated. Now, a lot of times the reason is very general. You did not provide all of the requested documentation. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, that's when you go talk to the Medicaid office and figure out why you were denied. If they're saying that information was missing, what information are they missing? So that you can, and I will say, be polite about it, as hard as that may feel, because in part, these people get yelled at all day, every day. If you are the one person who is nice to them, they are going to try to help you out because you weren't yelling at them. So, go to them, say, I'm so confused. I thought I provided all of the information you needed. You're saying information's missing. Can you tell me what's missing so I can get it to you? You know, show them that you're trying to help, you're trying to solve the problem, and be nice to them. they will be nice back and they will try to help however they can. Figure out what is causing the problem. I will say sometimes, though, there is a mix-up. So I have seen several situations where the Medicaid computer system still has a bank account listed that was closed 2 years ago. And they're saying, well, you didn't provide us that bank account information. And you're like, but I closed that account. Well, what you need to do is go back to that bank, get them to write you a letter saying, this account was closed on this date. We paid out X amount of money when they closed that account. This account no longer exists. Um, I had someone once, and this is why I went into a little detail on the life insurance policy bit, had someone once who had a term life insurance policy through his employer. And his health had taken a turn. And so we were trying to help him get on, at the time, it was called the aged and disabled waiver. And initially, Medicaid denied him, in part because we did not provide information on his life insurance policy because they had that information in their computer system. Well, number one, it was a term life insurance policy, so there was never any cash value in the first place, so it should have been irrelevant. But more importantly, this was life insurance through his employer. He had to stop working 2 years before that because his health was getting worse. So that policy no longer existed. Well, what we had to wind up doing was we called the life insurance company. We talked to his former employer to figure out who it was. We called the life insurance company. We explained what was going on. We explained, his health has taken a turn. We're trying to help him get services to help him be able to live his life. But Medicaid is saying that he still has this life insurance policy. Can you write us a letter saying when the policy ended, that he no longer has the policy, that there was no cash value that was paid out because it was a term policy? They said absolutely. And life insurance companies, believe it or not, a lot of them are kind of used to this, especially because of older adults. So it's not as unusual of a request as you think. And they said absolutely. They had it emailed to us the very next day. We submitted that to the Medicaid office, and ultimately we got the gentleman his Medicaid and his aged and disabled waiver. So sometimes those are the things that we're seeing. I have someone else who he lived in one city, and through his waiver provider was his representative payee, and so they had his money in a bank account at a local bank, and that's not a big deal. That's pretty common. However, he has since moved from there. In fact, he moved from there 5 years ago. That bank account was closed, but Medicaid's computer system still had it listed. So we had to get a letter from that bank and from the provider saying, hey, when this person moved from our city to the other city, he was no longer our client. We closed this account, and that money went to his new bank. So sometimes we have to get documentation when some of the information in Medicaid's computer system is out of date. Okay, so know that you may need to do that, and talking with the Medicaid office to figure out why you have been terminated or why you have been denied, and trying to get more concrete information beyond just well, you didn't provide all information. What information is missing, so that we can get that information to you. And when you're going at it from that perspective and with that attitude, when you're talking to Medicaid, they are very helpful in trying to get you the right information. Because if you qualify, they want to make sure you can get these benefits. They just have rules that they have to follow too. I will also say get everything in writing, because again, we are the 2% of what they deal with. And sometimes the information that they give us may not appropriately apply to a person who is on a waiver. So if Medicaid is telling you something, ask if they can get you that in writing. I have also seen some situations recently where someone went to the Medicaid office with every intention of appealing, and the Medicaid office is supposed to help you with an appeal. But what happened was, while the individual or the family thought that they were appealing the termination, that's not what happened. The Medicaid office actually just processed it as a new application. That causes lots of problems. So, because then it wound up interfering with the individual's waiver. It took us several months to get it all worked out. We eventually did get it worked out because, again, almost everything is fixable. But I don't want somebody having to wait several months of not getting the services they need because of a paperwork error. So get copies of everything. Get everything in writing. If if the Medicaid office is telling you something, say, hey, can you give me some documentation on that for my records? And so make sure you keep that paper trail and keep copies of everything. Now, if a person has a waiver, again, we have some different rules here. And part of it is many families are used to ignoring the redetermination letters because typically in the past, they've said, oh, only send this in if you need to update your information. If you don't need to update your information, don't worry about it. That is not the case anymore. Right now, everybody has to reply to these letters. So this year, you must comply. So you want to provide all of your child's information. When it asks about others in the home, report who else lives there and then just add not Medicaid eligible. So if I'm doing this for my son, I'm going to, report all of his information. When it asks about other people in the household, I'm going to list Carly Shortino Poulter dash mother dash not Medicaid eligible. Part of the reason they ask that is for some types of Medicaid, it depends who, it depends who lives in the house. There are some types of Medicaid who look at the income of everyone who lives in the house, not just the individual. But again, for us, because our loved ones are on waivers, the income of everybody in the house doesn't matter. It's just their income that matters, unless they're married, and that's a different story. If they ask for family income and family assets, provide it. In the past, I would have told you, hey, it's up to you if you want to do that, because if you have a child under 18 who is on the waiver, family income and family assets aren't counted while they're on the waiver. In the past, I would have told you, you can provide it or not. It's easier if you do. It makes the process go a whole lot faster. And part of that is because the Medicaid computer system tells them they have to have it. That's why they're so insistent upon that. But now I've got to change what I tell you, because now what Medicaid is telling us is if Medicaid asks for family income and family asset information, you have to provide it. Otherwise, they can deny or terminate your child for failure to provide the requested documentation. Now, don't worry about it, because the Medicaid computer system is still going to ignore all of that information because the little box is checked off that you have a waiver. So it knows to ignore that information. But I don't want your child to lose their Medicaid or their waiver because they've asked for family income and family assets and you haven't provided it because in the past you haven't needed to. So at this point, I want to open it up for questions. And so go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and we have a whole bunch of questions here. So I am very, very happy to see this. Let's see. Why do they need full bank account information? You know what? And I know that is that is one of those frustrating things, because banks don't print your full bank account number on your bank statements as a safety feature so that nobody can steal your bank account information. As weird as this is going to sound, Medicaid wants the full bank account number on there to prove that it's the right bank account. Yeah, this is one of those times where I am going to tell you, don't apply logic to government programs. Logic and government do not like to work and play well together very often. But yes, that's one of the things. And I can't remember off the top of my head whether if you get your statement in the mail, if that's the one that has the full bank account number on it, or if you go online and try to print one up, if it has the full bank account information on there, there are ways that you can get copies of it with a full bank account number on there, but that's what you need to provide to them, okay? Um, what if the special needs trust is not funded and won't be until the death of the parent by life insurance? Totally agree. And that's, in all honesty, that's how most special needs trusts are set up, but they still want to see all of that. The fact that there's no money in it just makes that a little bit easier. But part of it is they are looking specifically at the wording of the special needs trust. So like they're asking for what's called the joinder agreement and things like that to make sure that it is set up correctly, because sometimes people will set up what they think is a special needs trust, but it's not. It's a regular trust fund, so it doesn't meet the federal requirements to be a protected account. And sometimes people will go to an attorney and it's not set up correctly. So that's why they're asking for all of that information, is to make sure that it's actually set up correctly so that it's not counted as an asset. And the fact that there's no money in it just makes that a little bit easier, because even if it weren't set up correctly, there's nothing in it, so no harm, no foul, and it gives you time to correct it. Okay. Um, what should be counted as an asset if they only own their own clothing, books, etc.? You know what? Those types of normal household things, they don't even care about. They're looking for things that you can sell basically for substantial amounts of money. So if you own a car, you can sell your car. If you own a house, you can sell your house. One of the things, though, is that you can also own your own business and still have Medicaid. So like, I know of some self-advocates who do own their own business, whether it's, I know somebody who mows lawns during the summer. And so, he may buy a lawnmower that they're not going to count. But he can also have something called a PASS account, a plan to achieve self-sufficiency, which is money that he can put into that account for his business, and it's not counted as an asset against him. There's also one called a PES account. Um, and the E stands for employment. I can't remember exactly what PES stands for. I know where I look it up. I just don't have to do that very often. But again, that's one of those protected accounts. And so even if you've got money in there, because they're protected accounts, they're not going to be counted against them, but they still want documentation on those. There's a specialized account called an individualized development account, which actually has nothing to do with disability whatsoever. An individualized development account is actually a specialized account to help people get out of poverty. And so, there are special rules about that. But money in an individualized development account also is not counted as an asset by any of the government programs, Medicaid, HUD, Social Security, any of them. So there are some specialized accounts that way as well. But general like household things like, clothing, bedroom furniture, um, your toys, thinking about my son's room, all that, that's just general living things, and so they don't care. Um, I cannot create an account for my child on the Medicaid benefits portal. It won't allow me into it. Who do I speak to resolve that? That is a great question. I'm going to have to find that answer, and I will get back to you. So thank you for signing up under your name. But I can try to find that out and get that information to you. There is a it's not a customer service. There's a number you can call when you're having problems like that. I'll find that information and get it to you. Okay. Um, so yeah, what do you recommend for tracking redetermination needs for folks who are houseless and lack phone or computer access regularly to check or no mailing address to receive the letters? That is an excellent question. And in all honesty, that is something that gets overlooked quite often. And so one of the things I would recommend in a situation where somebody may be homeless. Somebody may be moving around a lot, or they don't have a phone. Um, they they don't necessarily have computer access. Even if they have access to the library, they may not have the skills to be able to use the computer. How do we do that? And that's where I'm going to say, and that's where I'm going to say, first of all, are there people in their lives who may be willing to help with some of this? That might be a church. That might be a community organization. If they are involved with, say, a community mental health organization, um, or something along those lines, the community mental health organization or the community mental health center may be willing to allow them to use their address, or may be able to help them log in to their Medicaid portal. One of the other things is when someone is listed as an authorized representative with Medicaid, that authorized representative can also create an account, and an organization who is acting as an authorized representative can create an account and log in through their organization to be able to see that information. So, for example, um, the ARC will often help individuals who are having trouble with Medicaid. And sometimes, especially if we're trying to help with an appeal or something along those lines, we may ask, will you allow us to become an authorized representative to help you with this appeal so it's easier for us to get information? And then when we're done, you can revoke that authorization. That's not a problem at all. But because of that, you know, the ARC, I created an account for the ARC through the Medicaid benefits portal as an organizational authorized representative. And then I created an account for me under that. So, excuse me, so that when I am helping an individual with a Medicaid appeal or something like that, I can go in and I can actually see all of that information and gather the information that I need to help them with the appeal or to upload documents directly, especially if they don't have the ability to do that. I work in an office, I'm spoiled. I have a scanner so that I can scan documents and make them digital. Most people don't have that at their house. I've got that here at my office, so I can do that a whole lot easier, for people. And so that's one thing that you can do just to kind of help monitor that. If they are getting MRO services through a community mental health center, you can ask that their case manager or their therapist or their skills person can do that with them as part of the skills that they are working on for that. And part of the reason I'm focusing on mental illness as I'm giving these examples is simply because if somebody were in waiver services, their waiver provider should have stepped in a long time ago to help with all of those things. But if it's also something where someone does not have an address to be able to receive letters, there are some organizations who will allow individuals who don't have an address to use their organization's address and receive their mail there. So especially there are certain homeless organizations who will allow people to use their business address as their address for things like Medicaid and SNAP. So because a lot of times they're trying to get them more permanent housing or even transitional housing in the process. So they'll let them use the business's address as their address to get mail while they're working on getting them housing. If So that is typically the best way to do that. If they're not working with a service provider or an organization, that's where you're gonna, maybe talk to your local faith community. That's where you may talk to your township trustee's office to see if they would be willing to let them use the township trustee's office as an address to be able to get some of these things set up. And sometimes it's also a matter of, somebody had a house fire. And so they're homeless because their house burned down. They don't have a permanent address right now. And so things like that can also happen. Um, How do you get a portal account set up if the person is a minor? Do you use the social security and birth date or the adults? You use the Medicaid participants social security number and birth date. But you as the parent can set up the account using like your email address and all of that. And you can either set it up. So let's say Andy, who is my son, let's say he was, 16. Well, I could set up an account for Andy, and then just use my email address and things like that for it. Or I could set up an account as an authorized representative for Andy, and set up an account through my name, and things like that. Somebody responded, paper is power. You are so right. When we had kids, we knew that there would be a lot of things we would have to do. No one ever told us the paperwork we'd have to do. And that's for all that's for all parents. Throw in there when you're the parent of a child with a disability. Man, the amount of paperwork we do. And you are right, paper is power, because when you've got that documentation and they say, well, we never got that. You can say, huh, well, here's my copy that shows you received it on, January 15th, 1995. Totally made that up there. But yes. Somebody's asking, how do we sign up for a waiver? Well, the if you need to sign up for the family supports waiver, or the which is for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, you can go to bddsgateway.in.gov. You know what? I just type in Beads Gateway and get it that way. I've got it bookmarked. So now it's been so long since I've had to type it. I don't quite remember. But if you were to Google BDDS Gateway, and I know Beads has changed their name, but that's the acronym they're still using on that gateway. That's where you can apply for the family supports waiver. If you need to apply for the health and wellness, pathways, or traumatic brain injury waivers, you're actually going to call a company called Maximus. And you call them, tell them that you want to apply for this waiver and you want to set up an appointment for a level of care assessment. They will set up that appointment, because that's the first step is that they need to do a level of care assessment. And so for those skilled nursing waivers, which are pathways, health and wellness, or TBI, you start by calling Maximus. Um, hold on. Let me see if I can, uh, let's see if I can get you their phone number. Got something in the way right where I need it. Um, let's do it this way. Go. Sorry for how long that took, guys. Um, the phone number for Maximus is 1-833-597-2777. And the Beads Gateway portal is bdds.gateway.fssa, so Family and Social Services Administration .in.gov. So sorry that took a little long for me to find those things. We are currently shut down for services. I verbally made sure no further documentation is needed. I was told a manager would review the file. We were approved, but we were told there is a 13-day wait period. We are currently in the wait period. Do I need to write a written appeal or handle differently, trying to avoid reapplication? Wow, so there is a lot to unpack there. Um, okay, so it sounds like I don't yeah, it sounds like you were actually terminated. The termination went through before the appeal did. Um, you said I verbally made sure no further documentation is needed, and that makes me a little bit nervous just because I hear so often where people are told things that aren't quite accurate. You were told a manager would review the file. You were approved, but there's a 13-day wait period. That's interesting. That is not something I've heard before where there's a waiting period. Now, I have heard of situations, especially in the last year, where someone has been in the pending stage. And in all honesty, I've had some people in the pending stage for months on end. And normally that's when the Medicaid medical review team is reviewing the medical records to confirm disability. Um, I don't know what that 13-day wait period is about. Um, one of the things you could do is Medicaid has Medicaid regional managers, and they have very specific email addresses, and and the regional managers depend on where you live, and you can contact them to kind of ask if they can give you some additional information. My experience with the Medicaid regional managers is actually very good. First of all, they're required to respond within 3 to 5 business days, and they always do. Okay. But like I said, a lot of times, we have a lot of really different rules. They're familiar with those things. So we always tend to get good information there. So I would actually reach out to the Medicaid regional manager, and try to find out, try to get an update and get a better idea of what all is going on. And what I would say to them is I would say, hey, my child has a Medicaid waiver through the Bureau of Disability Services. We had a problem with our Medicaid. His Medicaid got terminated. We got all of the documentation in. I've been told that we have since been approved, but we're in a waiting period. I don't understand. Can you help me understand this? Because my son is going without services and really needs them. That's kind of how I would handle that kind of an email, is to ask for information, ask for clarification, and they are normally very good about providing that information. I would say, is there any idea we have on how when his Medicaid may be reinstated so that he can start his services again, and see if they give that information. And if you can email me, and my email is Carly, it's Karly at ARCIND, short for Arc of Indiana, .org. I'll send you the link to the regional manager's map so that you can figure out which one serves your area. Okay. If my son has an ABLE account and passes away, would Medicaid freeze the account and take monies from the account? Yes. So the way ABLE legislation was written in Congress, any money left in an ABLE account when the individual passes away, Medicaid is allowed to basically do what's called a state recovery and recover any money that they spent on him to reimburse them for their costs. Now, they won't go beyond that, but oftentimes Medicaid has already spent a lot of money by the time a person passes away. So anything left in an ABLE account, Medicaid can take to reimburse them for the cost of your loved one's care. Will those of us on waivers have to go through redetermination every 6 months or still yearly? Right now, it's still yearly. And I think that for the foreseeable future, for people on waivers, it's going to be once a year. It's really, they're targeting that Medicaid expansion population. So here in Indiana, individuals who are on HIP, and individuals who are on HIP and who are over the poverty level. That's who they are targeting initially for twice a year redeterminations. I don't have anything saying that they will start doing buy-in or twice a year redeterminations on people on waivers, but I don't have anything that says that they won't either, and they can always start doing that. But what we're seeing right now is while they are still technically doing a redetermination once a year, they're doing reviews more often than that, and so that can also cause problems. But for the waiver population, it's still supposed to be once a year. It's really the HIP population that starting in 2027 will do it every 6 months. How far in advance of renewal should they send redetermination? I.e. waiver plans year start is January. When will redetermination begin? That's an excellent question. And so just like your waiver goes on your anniversary date, so does your Medicaid. And so typically speaking, what you will see is that they will send redetermination paperwork about 2 months before your Medicaid anniversary date, so that it gives you time to gather, so that you have enough time for notice, you have enough time to gather the documents, you have enough time to get the documents in. And then also they build in a little bit of leeway so that if it comes in a little late, you may not necessarily be, your Medicaid may not be fully terminated at that point. But typically speaking, they'll send it about two months before your Medicaid annual renewal date. And once you've been doing this for a while, you will recognize when they send it out. So like for my son, for example, his redetermination paperwork always comes late June, early July. So I know to look for it. So this year, because I've gotten so many calls from people who have had trouble, I was watching the mail like a hawk. And literally we got to the point where I was going to I was going to log in the very next day to see if they had sent something, and it came that night. So you'll get a feel for the cycle. But normally they send it about 2 months before the Medicaid anniversary date. We worked hard to get any asset out of our child's name over 20 years ago prior to Medicaid services. However, you never know. Is there a way to find if there are any assets under our child's name? Oh, that is an excellent question. I am certain there is. I am not a forensic accountant, so I don't know how to do those things though. The Medicaid asset verification system would be flagging anything. And the irony in this is this actually happened to us, not through Medicaid, but through Social Security. A couple of years ago, my son had his very first Social Security redetermination, and we were providing all of the documents, and they say, "So, tell us about these 8 savings bonds." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Apparently, there were 8 savings bonds in my son's name. His family loves him very, very much. And when he was born, they bought him some savings bonds because that is what their family does. They were doing it out of love. We had no idea there was an issue at the time. Came back to bite us a little bit because since we didn't know that those existed, we didn't take any of that into account when it came to his asset limit. So we actually had to pay money back to a few $1,000s back to Social Security. But so it can happen. One of the things I would do is, pull your child's credit report, see if there's anything on there. How to look for assets. Beyond that, I've got to admit, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I could try to talk to some people here tomorrow to see if they have any ideas, and I can get back with you. But I don't know for sure. Can we prepay for funeral expenses for our loved one? You absolutely can. Would this be a funeral trust? Nope, a funeral trust is actually a different thing. and they say they already have a special needs trust for our son. So here's the thing. Yes, you can prepay for a funeral. Depending on the age of your loved one and their health condition, you know, that may be an option. That may be something that might make you might want to think about a little bit more because so my son is 25, and he is physically healthy. God willing, he is going to live another, 50, 60 years. I don't want to pre-play for a funeral now because that's banking a lot on that company still being around 60 years from now. If my loved one was in a more compromised health situation, that may be appropriate. So yes, you can prepay for a funeral. That is never counted against you, so that is not a problem whatsoever. A funeral trust is a special type of account specifically to pay for end of life expenses. With a special needs trust, if you start the process before the individual passes away, then the trust can continue to pay for those expenses. But if you haven't done that, that special needs trust is going to end when your son passes away. So after the fact, a trust would likely not be able to pay for a funeral. There are some companies that do offer specialized burial insurance that is approved as an exempt account by both Medicaid and Social Security. The one that I can think of off the top of my head is a company called Special Considerations, and so they can provide up to $10,000 of burial insurance, and that can pay for all sorts of funeral expenses. And they have worked with both Indiana Medicaid and with Social Security so that neither Medicaid nor Social Security will count that burial insurance policy as an asset against the person. Um, do we need to do a tax return for our 21-year-old son who is on SSI, or can we still claim him as a dependent on his parents' tax returns? First of all, I am not a tax preparer, so I am going to tell you, go ahead and talk to whoever does your taxes. Typically speaking, I don't think that people who are on SSI and only have SSI tends to need to file taxes. But again, I am not a tax preparer, so double check that because there are many organizations and agencies I will take on. The IRS is not one of them. So I don't mess with the IRS. Um, can you still claim him as a dependent on your tax returns? If you are providing more than 51% of his financial needs, yeah, he's still your dependent. And so keep in mind, that also means if you still have him on your employer-based health insurance, in addition to his waiver, his cost, his portion of the premium for that health insurance policy would count as money that you are spending toward his care. So there are ways you can do that as long as you are providing for 51% of his expenses. I have a life insurance for my son. Would this be an asset against him? It's a term policy with no cash value. So no and no. And here's why I say that. You said, I have a life insurance policy on my son. Your son is the subject of the policy. You are the owner of the policy. So if there was cash value, it would be your asset because only you would be the one who could cash it in, not your son. He's the subject of the policy. But also, because it's a term policy, there is no cash value. So it is not an asset at all. So nope. My portal says under authorized representative request, but I cannot get link to work. Been the authorized person for 17 years. Keep getting different answers since my email is not working. Not sure what to do. I'm not sure what to do either. I'm gonna encourage you to call one of our family advocates. Call us here at the ARC 317-977-2375. I've got somebody else where I'm going to try to look up the it's not customer service, but it's the customer support. Let me find the customer support number for the portal so that I can get that to you. I just don't have it right now. Okay. Um, should we include money that he has essentially in a peanut butter jar? Birthday money, grandma gave him 20 bucks for Christmas, things like that. Technically, yes, you are supposed to report the cash he has on hand. If he's got $2 in his wallet, you are supposed to report that. That is technically the way the rules are written. That is true for both Social Security and for Medicaid. If your waiver member is an adult, it's not Medicaid's business what assets and income the parents or other family members have. If the waiver member is an adult, you're absolutely correct. Okay. And in all honesty, you're still correct if they have a waiver in their children too. But because they are, let's see, because they are children, one of the things they are looking at is to see, should this child qualify under Medicaid for low income children. So they are looking for that too, in part because, and again, I'm about to get totally in the weeds here, guys. Sorry about that. Like I said, we got 37 different types of Medicaid here in Indiana, and we've got subsets within some of those 37 types. There is also what's called a Medicaid hierarchy. Some types of Medicaid, as this is a weird way to say it, some types of Medicaid are more required than others. Some get preference. And so they are looking, in part, they are looking to see, should this person be in a different category that has a higher preference or is higher on the hierarchy list? And so that's in part why they are asking for family income and family assets when it is a child under 18. When it's a person over 18, they are their own household for purposes of Medicaid. And so that's a little bit different. Some types of Medicaid will look at the income of everyone who lives in the same address. Those are what are called MAGI rules, stands for Modified Adjusted Gross Income. That was something that passed in, I think, 2008. I could be wrong on the year, but it was during the Obama administration, and it was a way to in all honesty, it was a way to cut down on what was considered Medicaid fraud, where you had couples who were living together but not getting married so that their kids could qualify for Medicaid. That's why they created those Maggie rules, was to crack down on that. But Medicaid disability is not a Maggie category. That's why that doesn't apply to us. Let's see. So somebody's asking about Senate Bill 30. You are too young to know that that's called Senate Bill 30 because I know who that is. Um, Senate Bill 30 was actually legislation passed in Indiana back in 1991 that excluded the consideration of family income and family assets for children who are on waivers. So you're absolutely right, which is why the Medicaid computer system is still going to ignore it. But what we are hearing from Medicaid is now they are still, if you are a child under 18, they are going to ask for family income and family assets. And if you don't provide it, they can deny you or terminate your Medicaid for failure to report. Please understand, I'm not saying I agree with that. I am letting you know that that is how they are going to proceed going forward, because I don't want your loved ones to lose their Medicaid over something like that. I asked Medicaid yesterday about the benefits portal for children under 18. Oh, and they say children under 18 cannot have an online portal account. They must be 18 or older. Create one for you and do it that way. So, sorry, that sounded very flippant. I don't mean it to be flippant. I mean, then set it up with your information, and get to it that way, because you can do that as well. For the prepaid funeral, would the funeral home be the beneficiary or the parents? So when you're prepaying for a funeral, that's not an insurance policy. It's just that you're paying in advance. So think about it like, oh, this is going to sound really weird. Think about like when you buy furniture, you may pay for it, but you're not going to get it until 6 months from now, because they still have to make the furniture. That's what prepaying a funeral is you are prepaying it. It's not an insurance policy. You're just paying for it in advance. With an insurance policy, like a burial policy, no, you would make, for example, you can make yourself the beneficiary of that policy. When someone passes away, and you are paying for a funeral, a lot of times what you do is you take a life insurance policy into the funeral home, you sign it over to the funeral home, and then the insurance company pays the funeral home directly, and then whatever the funeral home doesn't use because the funeral didn't cost that much, they then write the check to the beneficiary. Um, Okay, so we've got a lot of people who are having some problems with the authorized representative account. So sounds like I need to do a little more digging and start looking into that a little bit more and post something about that on our social media. So guys, now I have it to do. You've given me homework. I will get on to the homework and find out that information and figure out how to proceed from here. And we'll put that out for us to, wow, speaking really well tonight. I will put that out on our social media so that we're giving you guys those answers. I'm my uncle's legal guardian. He had a house fire. He owns the home, and we expect the insurance to pay out for the house. The house is a complete loss. How do I report those funds, or who do I speak to get guidance for it? Oh my goodness. First of all, I am so sorry that your uncle is going through that. That is so much stress that none of you needed. And I am so grateful you asked this question. Sometimes things like this happen. Sometimes somebody wins the lottery, because I want to talk about good things here. So Medicaid has regulations for something called an unanticipated or non-recurring lump sum payment. So if, for example, you have a house fire and you're going to get the insurance payout for that. Let's say you sold the house. Let's say your Aunt Bertha left your child $10,000 and you weren't expecting that. Medicaid has a specific regulation for an unanticipated, non-recurring lump sum payment where they will not count it as income the month you get it, but then you've got to take care of it before the end of the month because they will count it as a resource the next month, unless it's Social Security, which has its own rules. And what I mean by that is if you get a Social Security back payment, there are special rules for that. But what you can do is when you get his insurance payout, you can then, first of all, use the money to replace the things he needs because he's going to need new things. And that's okay for you to use it for that. That's what it's for. You just want to make sure that by the end of that month, that you get it into get any remainder into a special needs trust. I say a special needs trust because an ABLE account will only allow you to put $18,000 into the account each year. In January, that's going to go up to $19,000. But I'm anticipating that his insurance payout is going to be more than that. And so because of that, that's why I say a special needs trust. Now, also understand that any money that goes into a special needs trust can only be used for your uncle's sole benefit. So like if there are, if you guys were all living together and you needed to buy a new couch, well, if there were four of you living in the house, one of those four being your uncle's special needs trust could only be used to pay for 1/4 of the couch because it'll only allow him to pay his fair share of the expenses. But the month you get it, and there are special, like I said, there are special regulations for that. If you send me an email, I can give you that information from the Medicaid policy manual so that you can provide that to Medicaid when you report this, because you will need to report it. And then just by the end of the month, make sure that it's in a special needs trust. Um, Okay, so somebody else, see, we're crowdsourcing things here because somebody else shared their experience in setting up a portal account for her minor child. I've had to connect with the portal tech support. Tech support, That is the phrase that I was missing this entire time. Thank you. I had to connect with the portal tech support line multiple times to create or fix my access to my child's account. The tech support people have been very helpful every time, but they're only available certain hours. Hope this helps. Oh my goodness, my dear, thank you so much for sharing that. And just as a side note, that's the big thing. Man, we are always there to help each other out. It's I have learned more from other parents than I have anything else, and that's just it. We families need to stick together because that's how we learn so many things. So thank you so much for sharing that. Like I said, we'll still get that information out on our social media because I know several of you are having this same issue, and that way you can go back and you can look at it. Okay. Um, should we use his name to open the portal account or put it under one of our names? If we get FSSA letters as authorized representatives, does that mean we are an authorized representative for the purposes of the portal? We are legal guardians. Yes, so first of all, this answer is going to depend on whether your loved one is over 18 or under 18. Because of the way you phrase this, I think your loved one is over the age of 18. So you would put it in his name. And open it in his name. You can also create an authorized representative account for yourself as well, so that you can get access to all of that. And part of that is so that in part you can teach your son how to use these things because I know it is so much easier for us just to do that, but it's also important for us to teach our kids and to also teach that next generation how these things all work and bring them in on this so that they can see how things work, so that they can see it's not some of these things are not as hard as they sound. And we're teaching that next generation, including our loved ones with disabilities, how to do those things so that they can take more responsibility for themselves and and um and lead their own lives too. Um, what if you are legal guardian and they do not sign? I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you can give me a little bit more information, I would appreciate it so that I can actually answer your question. Oh, then I think you put the beads gateway under right underneath it. If you are talking about if you're talking about, signing on the waiver application, it's an electronic signature, so you can just type it. But now I think that's not what you were talking about. So if you could give me a little more information, I'll try to do a better job of answering you. Um, let's see. Hmm. My son is 28 and we submitted the waiver application in April of 2025. There is a 3-year wait for him to receive services. Is there any way to get behavior consultants and rec therapy before the 3 years is up? Well, first of all, I do want to say, because your son is 28, if either parent, and it does have to be a parent, was ever in the military, either they're active duty now or they are a veteran, he can request priority status based on that, and jump to the front of the line. But I know that there are a lot of people who that doesn't apply to. So yeah, you've got the 3-year wait. Um, as far as rec therapy, is there a way to get that before the 3 years is up? True rec therapy with an actual recreation therapist, the only way would be to private pay for that. But then there are also a lot of other programs out there that aren't rec therapy because you're not working with a recreation therapist, but you're still doing recreational things. So whether that's Special Olympics, whether that's your local YMCA, your local parks and rec departments, and talk with your local parks and rec departments because some of them have disability specific programming, and some of them just work with the disability community so often that their programs in general are just very welcoming environments. And part of the reason I say that is here in Indiana, we have a lot of homeschoolers. And we have a lot of homeschoolers, or we have a lot of people who homeschool because their children have disabilities and they weren't happy with the school system. And so they choose to homeschool. But those homeschoolers often work with their local libraries and they often work with their local parks and rec departments. And so as a result, even though the library or the parks and rec departments may not have disability specific programming, because they work with so many children with disabilities who are homeschooling, they just become more welcoming environments because they understand disability more because they're around people with disabilities more. And so I see that in my own community where you know if they work with so many homeschoolers and so many of them are students with disabilities, what happens is, nowadays, if we're in the library and a child suddenly starts having a meltdown, their first thought isn't, oh my gosh, get your kid under control. Their first thought is, oh, we've got a problem. Are the lights too bright? Is the music too loud? That's a huge mindset shift. And so I'm just using that to illustrate that a lot of these places, because they are working more and more with people with disabilities, they become welcoming environments. So even if something is open to the general public, your son may very well be welcome to join them. Is that a guarantee? No. But it's certainly something to explore. As far as behavior consultants go, again, if we're talking a true behavior consultant, that's going to be private paying. But you also want to look to see, are there mental health resources in your area? Not only a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but many of the community mental health centers have something called Medicaid Rehabilitation Option or MRO services. Now, some of the community mental health centers refuse to work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but there are some who do, and there are some who are around the state. So part of it's going to depend a little bit on where you're at, so that I can tell you what those resources can be. But you can also start by calling them up and talking with them. And the magic words you want to use are MRO. Okay. Um, if they have not sent it and it's not on the portal, what do I do? Okay, so I think this is about if they haven't sent the redetermination paperwork and the redetermination paperwork is not showing up on the portal, it's not time yet. So you don't have to do anything right now. Okay. It's when you get that redetermination paperwork or when you see it on the portal, that's when you need to get this information into them. Everybody's on a different time, on a time cycle based on when you originally applied. It's just not your time yet. So you're good, my dear. My redetermination is December and we have not heard a word. What should I do? You need to contact the Medicaid office right away. You need to log into the portal. If you don't already have an account and can create an account, go ahead and do that, and you will see that information right there. Otherwise, go into your local Medicaid office and tell them, hey, this is about the time I should be getting redetermination paperwork for my son, but I haven't gotten it yet. Is that something you can print up for me? Because if it's there, they can do that for you. Social Security said, don't sell the savings bonds my folks got for my son shortly after he was born. Said it would disqualify him temporarily from SSI and possibly Medicaid waiver. So what they meant by that is, if you sold all of those savings bonds at once, it would get him over income. And that's why they're saying that. Okay. But what you can do is, first of all, you don't have to sell the bonds as long as and especially since we're talking SSI, as long as the value of those savings bonds is below $2,000, hey, not a problem. But what you can also do is sell like one at a time, like, one in a month. And, um, and that all depends on the amount of the savings bond. But if you sell them like one at a time, and you're basically spreading that out, typically that's okay. Now, because your son is on SSI, you also need to understand that when you cash in a bond, that is considered unearned income. So if you have a savings bond worth $100 and you cash it in, because it's unearned income, you got that $100 from cashing in the savings bond, his SSI will go down by $100 that month, or technically 2 months later, but for that month. So there is a trade-off there, Okay, but if you do it a little bit at a time, that's how you can liquidate them. And really it's more about making sure that that the total value of all of those bonds stays below $2,000. And it's not just that, it's all of his assets stay below a total of $2,000. So if he's got, say, $1,200 in value in those savings bonds, and he's got a bank account, make sure at the end of the month his bank account is below $800, so that the 1,200 and 800 together are below the 2,000. I hope that made sense. Can an adult on Medicaid and the waiver also have private insurance? Yes, and this is one of the ways we break those rules, because typically a person cannot have private insurance and Medicaid at the same time. We are one of those exceptions. If you are a person on a waiver, you can have private insurance as well as Medicaid. And eventually, your loved one will also likely wind up with Medicare as well. And so it is actually fairly common for a person on the waiver to have Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance all at the same time. Um, so question about providing family income for someone over 18. For someone over 18, it's completely irrelevant, because since he is now 18, he is his own household. So for Medicaid purposes, because he is on a type of Medicaid that does not look at the entire everybody who lives at the same address, he is his own household. So you would not be providing your income and asset information. Um, let's see. Let's see. Oh, the person, okay, so the person who was asking about the savings bonds um, says, we just looked it up. We only have one bond. It's now worth $900. So if you were to cash that in, um, the and frankly, I would wait until January to do that, because in January, the SSI goes up. Right now, the maximum SSI rate is $967 a month. Come January, it'll be $994 a month. So you can cash it in then. They will count that as $900 of unearned income. And typically, SSI is paying 2 months behind. So when when they're paying when you are getting your SSI benefits in March, that is for what your earnings were in January. So if you were to cash that savings bond in January, because it is unearned income, his March SSI check would be $900 less. Okay. um What if you cash savings bonds into a first party trust? I'm going to tell you that is beyond my knowledge base. This is where I will tell you I know enough about trusts to be dangerous, and I am smart enough to get you to an expert. This is one where you need an expert, because I don't know that answer. Um, let's see. So that looks like all of the questions we have today. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope this was actually helpful. I will also say in December, we will not have an Ask the ARC. We take the month of December off because we know that with the holidays, everything gets very, very busy. So we will see you again come January. If you have any requests for future Ask the ARC topics, let me know. I would love to hear what you want to hear about, and we will make sure that some of those things happen. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.